The human's boots sank slightly into the thick, wet soil as he stepped off the shuttle. The air was heavy, almost alive, carrying a scent he had never smelled before, sharp, metallic, and strangely sweet. Above, the sky was a deep violet, streaked with pale green clouds that flickered like electricity. He paused, heart pounding, and looked around. The jungle stretched endlessly in all directions, its dark trees twisting into shapes that seemed almost deliberate, watching him. A faint rustle came from the shadows. He froze, eyes narrowing. Something moved, small, quick, and deliberate. A soft whimper followed, almost like a child crying. The human crouched, trying to stay calm. "Hello?" he whispered, unsure if he was speaking to the wind or to whatever was out there. The sound came again, closer this time. A small figure emerged between the thick trunks. The cub was unlike any creature he had ever seen, about the size of a dog, with glimmering black fur and eyes that shone with intelligence and fear. Its body was marked with faint, pale lines that pulsed faintly, like veins glowing in the dark. It limped slightly, favoring one of its hind legs. The human's chest tightened. He could feel its fear, its confusion, its desperate need for help. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly, stepping closer but keeping his hands open, empty. The cub froze, ears flattening. Then, slowly, it tilted its head, studying him. Its eyes seemed to pierce through his soul, measuring him, deciding if he was friend or foe. The jungle around them was quiet now, as if it was holding its breath. He knelt and extended a hand. The cub took a cautious step forward, then another, its movements hesitant but curious. He noticed a deep gash along its shoulder, bleeding slightly. "You've been hurt badly," he murmured. He reached into his pack for a small medkit, but before he could touch it, a sudden roar cut through the trees. The cub froze and hissed low in its throat. The human's stomach dropped. That sound was no ordinary animal, it was something far larger, something dangerous. From the shadows, massive shapes moved. He could barely make out their forms through the mist, creatures taller than trees, with limbs that bent in impossible ways and eyes that glowed red. They circled silently, watching. His heart raced. The human instinctively stepped between the cub and the creatures. "Stay back," he said, voice firm though it trembled inside. The cub crouched behind him, its body tense, ready to flee if needed. The largest of the watchers stepped forward, its head towering above them. It let out a low, vibrating growl that shook the leaves. The human noticed something strange. Despite its size, it didn't charge. It simply watched, as if calculating. He could feel its intelligence, a predator not only of strength but of cunning. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to breathe slowly, trying to appear calm. "You're not going to hurt it," he said louder this time. "I won't let you." The creature tilted its head, a curious sound vibrating from its throat. It stepped back slightly, almost like it was testing him. The human realized then that this planet didn't follow Earth rules. Strength alone would not save him. Strategy, patience, and understanding were just as important. The cub whimpered again, small and frightened. The human crouched lower, speaking softly. "It's okay. I won't leave you." He touched its fur gently, and it flinched but didn't run. He noticed its breathing was ragged, its eyes darting constantly to the shadows. Something in its behavior told him it had been hunted before. Someone, or something, had been trying to take it. And maybe that threat was still close. A sudden screech echoed through the sky. The human looked up and saw strange flying shapes, winged predators circling high above. He ducked instinctively, but the cub froze in place, its gaze locked on the same direction. The tension in the air became unbearable, each second stretching longer than the last. He realized he was standing on a planet that didn't forgive mistakes, where curiosity could be fatal. He pulled a small communicator from his belt and whispered, "Control, this is Echo. I found the target, it's alive, and it's not alone." Static hissed in response. He clenched his jaw, feeling both relief and fear. He was not ready to leave the shuttle's safety, but something inside him wouldn't allow him to abandon the cub. It had chosen him, somehow, or maybe he had chosen it. He wasn't sure which. The jungle seemed to close in around them. Every sound, every movement could hide danger. Yet, despite the fear, despite the unknown, the human felt a spark of determination. He could not leave. He could not turn back. Not now, not ever. The cub shifted slightly, leaning against his leg, tentative trust forming between them. Above, the wind carried whispers that he could not understand, but he felt their meaning. This was only the beginning. The jungle was alive, watching, waiting. The creatures in the shadows had recognized him, and they would test him. The question was not whether he could survive, but whether he could protect the cub from a world that had no mercy. He straightened, eyes scanning the trees. "We'll face it, together," he said, voice steady though adrenaline coursed through him. The cub's small, trembling body pressed closer. He didn't know what awaited them, but he knew one thing: turning back was impossible. The adventure, the danger, the bond, it had already begun. And somewhere in the darkness, something far larger and more cunning than either of them watched, waiting for the right moment to strike. The human moved cautiously through the dense jungle, the cub following close behind. Its small paws left shallow prints in the soft soil, and each step echoed too loudly in the quiet. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle a potential threat. He kept one hand on the cub, guiding it through the thick undergrowth, while his other hand hovered near the small energy blade at his belt. A sudden snap of a branch made him freeze. The cub growled, a low warning sound that rumbled deep in its chest. Stay calm," he whispered though his own heart raced. The air felt heavier now, oppressive, as if the forest itself was holding him under scrutiny. From the shadows a group of figures emerged. They were humanoid but not human, sleek and pale, with glinting armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Weapons gleamed in their hands, long and curved, with tips that pulsed ominously. The human's stomach dropped. "Hunters," he muttered under his breath, recognizing the patterns from his limited intel. These were the ones who had been tracking the cub. They moved with perfect coordination, circling like sharks smelling blood. The cub hissed and pressed against his leg. Its small body trembled, but its eyes burned with defiance. "Step away from the cub," one of the hunters said, voice sharp and mechanical, like it was filtered through some device. The human squared his shoulders. "I won't let you take it," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Fear clawed at him, but he forced his pulse to slow, forcing himself to appear calm. The hunters advanced, and the jungle seemed to react. Trees bent slightly, leaves rustling unnaturally, almost warning of unseen traps. The human realized the terrain itself could be used against him. He picked up a small rock and tossed it to the side, hoping to distract them. One hunter spun instantly, eyes flashing, and the others shifted, closing in from all directions. The cub let out a sharp growl and darted between his legs. "No. Stay close," he yelled, lunging to grab it. For a moment they froze, the human pressed to the ground, the cub safe but terrified. Then the hunters moved again, faster now, their movements precise, almost preternatural. He could feel the danger pressing in from every side. Suddenly one of the hunters lunged, aiming a strange, whistling weapon at the cub. The human pushed forward instinctively, catching the cub and throwing it behind a thick tree trunk. The weapon fired, a streak of blue energy that hit the tree with a deafening crack. Splinters flew everywhere. His ears rang. "Get back," he shouted, holding his own blade now, energy humming faintly in the dim light. The hunters paused, eyes narrowing, then circled again. "You're alone," one said. "The cub is ours." Its voice was cold, devoid of emotion. The human's chest tightened. He swallowed hard and scanned the environment. There was no clear escape, only the thick jungle and its twisting roots. Then he noticed the vines above, long, strong, and flexible. An idea sparked. "Come on," he whispered to the cub. It hesitated, then followed. He grabbed a vine and swung onto a lower branch, pulling the cub with him. The hunters paused, confused for a moment, giving him a precious few seconds. The wind shifted, carrying new sounds, distant roars, twigs snapping under heavy footsteps, and something else, subtle, stalking. The human froze mid-swing. The cub pressed close to him, trembling. "Not now, we can't, not yet," he muttered. The predators in the jungle weren't just the hunters. Something else was moving, something bigger, watching. The hunters finally regrouped and pressed forward, weapons raised. The human swung down, landing on a patch of mossy ground. The cub crouched behind him, small but alert. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his fear. Every second mattered. The hunters were skilled, relentless, and trained to predict his moves. One hunter stepped forward, its weapon glowing, aimed directly at him. "Give it up," it said, voice cutting like a blade. The human shook his head. "Not a chance," he said, voice trembling with both defiance and adrenaline. The cub let out a growl, small but fierce. It lunged, swiping at the hunter's leg with claws that sparked faintly against the metal. The hunter yelped, stumbling back. The human seized the moment, kicking a loose branch at another hunter. It spun just in time, but the distraction allowed him to grab the cub and sprint deeper into the jungle. Branches whipped his face, roots snagged his boots, but he didn't stop. Behind them, the hunters shouted, but their voices were distant now, muffled by the thick undergrowth. They ran until the jungle opened into a small clearing. The human dropped to the ground, chest heaving, and held the cub close. Its small body shivered against his chest, and he felt a strange surge of protectiveness. "It's okay, we made it, for now," he whispered. But even as he spoke, the jungle seemed to pulse around them, alive with eyes and whispers. He knew this was only the first challenge. The hunters would not give up, and whatever else lurked here was still watching, calculating their next move. The cub nuzzled against him, tiny but determined, as if saying, "We survived together." The human nodded, jaw set. "Yes, together." And in that moment he realized survival on this planet was not just about strength or speed. It was about trust, instinct, and courage, things he would need in abundance if they were to survive the threats that had only just begun. The human and the cub moved slowly through the jungle, their senses on high alert. Every sound made him flinch: leaves snapping, distant screeches, and the soft rustle of something moving just out of sight. The cub stayed close, body pressed against his leg, small claws digging into his boots. He could feel its fear, and it mirrored his own. They had escaped the hunters, but the danger had only grown. A low growl rolled through the air, vibrating deep in his chest. He froze, scanning the shadows. The growl was followed by the thump of heavy footsteps. Something large was approaching, each step deliberate and terrifying. He crouched, pressing the cub behind him. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The cub's small body trembled, but its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, showing courage despite fear. From between the massive trees, a shape emerged. It was enormous, easily 3 times the height of the human. Muscles rippled under thick, dark skin, and its eyes glowed yellow, intelligent and assessing. Its long limbs moved silently, but every movement radiated strength and power. It paused, tilting its head as if studying them. The human's heart pounded. He didn't know whether this was another predator or a potential ally. "We're not your prey," he said carefully, keeping his voice calm but firm. The creature stepped closer, sniffing the air around them. The cub hissed, arching its back and showing teeth. It was small, but its warning was clear. Then something unexpected happened. The creature crouched slightly and made a low, rumbling sound. It didn't attack. The human tensed, unsure what to do. "What are you?" he asked. The creature's gaze shifted to the cub and then back to him, and a strange understanding seemed to pass between them. It was intelligent, aware, but not immediately hostile. The sound of snapping branches erupted behind them. The hunters had caught up. The human's stomach clenched. "They're here," he whispered, pulling the cub closer. The hunters moved with deadly precision, weapons glowing. The human's mind raced. There was no way to outrun them, not through this terrain. Suddenly the massive creature lunged forward. Not at them but at the hunters. Its movements were a blur of power and precision. Hunters shouted in panic as it struck, knocking one aside with a single swipe of its claw. Another hunter fired a weapon, but the creature twisted, dodging with unnatural agility and retaliated with crushing force. The human stumbled back, heart racing. The cub let out a high-pitched squeal, eyes wide, and pressed against the human. "Stay close," he said, scanning for escape. The hunters regrouped, now wary of the creature, which had become an unexpected shield. It roared, a sound so loud and deep it made the ground tremble, and for a moment, the human felt a strange surge of hope. The creature didn't attack him or the cub. Instead, it circled them once, protective and alert. The human realized it had chosen them as allies, perhaps sensing the cub's vulnerability or recognizing a kindred spirit. You're helping us?" he muttered in disbelief. The creature responded with another rumble, softer this time, almost like a confirmation. The human had no time to celebrate. The hunters regrouped and advanced, but the creature intercepted, striking with terrifying efficiency. Trees shattered under its strength and branches flew in all directions. The human ducked, narrowly avoiding a falling limb. The cub whimpered but stayed close, drawn by the protective aura of their new ally. "Come on, we move now," the human said urgently. He grabbed the cub and ran, keeping the massive creature between them and the hunters. The jungle's terrain worked in their favor. Dense vines, fallen logs, and twisted roots slowed the hunters while the creature's strength made it unstoppable. They moved deeper into a narrow ravine, shadows pressing in from all sides. The hunters paused at the edge, realizing pursuit would be difficult. The creature roared, shaking the ground, warning them to stay back. The human leaned against a tree, chest heaving. We made it, for now," he said, voice trembling from adrenaline. The cub pressed against him, small but steady. For the first time since landing on this planet, he felt a spark of relief. They had an ally, an apex predator far larger and stronger than any human fighting alongside them. But the human knew this wasn't a permanent safety. The hunters would return, and the jungle was full of dangers they had not yet seen. He knelt and looked at the cub, brushing its fur gently. "We can't rely on it forever," he said softly. "We have to learn, we have to survive, together." The cub pressed its head against him, a quiet reassurance. Behind them, the creature watched, eyes never leaving the hunters, always alert, always protective. The jungle was alive, and now they had a protector, but the human understood one truth clearly. Survival on this planet required more than courage. It required alliances, instincts, and understanding the rules of a world far older and harsher than Earth. Every step forward would bring new threats, but with the cub and the unexpected ally he felt ready. And somewhere in the dense canopy, other eyes watched. Not all were friendly. The first threat had been met, but the jungle was far from tamed. The human moved quietly through the thick jungle, the cub pressed against his side. Every sound echoed in his ears, the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, even the faint drip of water from high branches. His heart beat faster with each step. The hunters had disappeared temporarily, but he knew better than to think they were gone for good. They were patient, intelligent, and relentless. Ahead, the jungle opened slightly into a clearing. Sunlight filtered through the thick canopy, creating shifting patterns on the mossy ground. He scanned the area cautiously, noticing subtle changes in the environment, broken branches laid like tripwires, strange devices hidden beneath the undergrowth. A trap. He cursed under his breath, realizing the hunters had anticipated their path. "Careful," he whispered to the cub. Its small body shivered against him, but its eyes glowed with trust and determination. They had survived so far together, but every second now carried the weight of danger. He crouched, examining the devices, thin wires, sensors, and glimmering panels half hidden by vines. The hunters weren't just tracking them, they were trying to capture them alive. A low hum vibrated through the air, and he recognized it instantly: energy fields designed to immobilize anything that crossed them. The human's mind raced. "We need a plan," he muttered, glancing at the cub. The creature that had helped them earlier wasn't visible now, and he realized they were on their own for this part. He took a deep breath, focusing on the task ahead. The first step was simple but dangerous: disable the sensors without triggering the traps. He moved carefully, using sticks and rocks to test the ground ahead. The cub crouched beside him, small but alert, hissing whenever a wire shifted. The tension was unbearable. One wrong move could set off alarms, drawing the hunters back instantly. Suddenly, the humming intensified. He froze. From the shadows, a hunter stepped forward, its weapon glowing. "You can't escape," it said, voice cold and measured. The human's stomach clenched. The hunter had been lying in wait, predicting their movements perfectly. The cub growled, claws digging into his leg, but he knew aggression alone wouldn't save them. The human ducked behind a fallen log, heart hammering. "We have to move," he whispered. He spotted a narrow path along the edge of the clearing, partially hidden by thick vines. If they could reach it, they might escape the hunter's line of sight. Carefully, he nudged the cub forward. "Stay low, follow me exactly." The cub obeyed, small paws silent against the moss. The hunter fired a weapon, a pulse of energy streaking through the air. The human ducked, rolling to the side as the energy slammed into a tree, splintering it into pieces. He grabbed the cub and sprinted toward the hidden path. Behind them, the hunter advanced, slow but relentless, its movements precise and calculated. Every step felt like a countdown to failure. They entered the narrow path, twisting between massive roots and dense foliage. The jungle seemed to close in around them, the shadows thickening. The human's breathing was ragged, but he forced himself to stay quiet, forcing the cub to do the same. Every nerve was on edge. They could hear the hunter's mechanical breathing, the faint hum of energy weapons searching for them. Then, something shifted in the undergrowth. A low, vibrating growl echoed through the trees. The human froze. The creature that had helped them before appeared, massive and powerful, stepping from the shadows like a living wall of muscle and intelligence. Its eyes locked on the hunter, and it growled again, warning, commanding. The hunter hesitated, and the human saw his chance. "Now!" he shouted softly, and the cub darted forward, small but determined. The creature lunged at the hunter with terrifying speed, knocking it off balance. Energy weapons fired, sparks flying, but the massive predator moved too quickly, too precise. The human and cub sprinted past, using the distraction to navigate the remaining traps. The clearing ahead was littered with the hunter's devices, but he found a narrow gap between them and moved through carefully. The cub followed, claws scraping softly against rocks. Adrenaline pushed him forward, heart racing, mind focused entirely on survival. He could feel the presence of the hunters behind them, but the creature kept them at bay, roaring and slashing, a living shield of muscle and instinct. Finally, they reached a small stream, water glistening in the faint sunlight. The human knelt, letting the cub drink. "We made it, for now," he whispered, relief washing over him. The cub licked his hands in quiet gratitude, small body trembling with exhaustion. The creature watched from the shadows, still alert, still guarding, a silent promise of protection. But the human knew the danger wasn't over. The hunters would regroup. The traps were only the beginning, and the jungle was far from tamed. He looked at the cub, brushing the damp fur from its face. "We have to be ready," he said softly. "This is only getting harder." Above, the wind whispered through the branches, carrying the faintest sounds of movement. Something else was out there, watching, calculating, waiting for the right moment. The human swallowed hard, chest tight, realizing the jungle had more rules, more dangers than he had imagined. But for now they had survived the trap, escaped the immediate threat, and strengthened the bond between them. He straightened, eyes scanning the horizon. "We move forward," he said. The cub pressed closer, small but determined. And somewhere beyond the shadows, the creature shifted, ready to face whatever came next. The trap had tightened, but so had their resolve. The human crouched at the edge of the cliff, wind whipping his hair, heart hammering in his chest. The cub pressed tightly against his side, small and trembling, but its eyes shone with determination. Below them, the jungle stretched endlessly, dark and alive, filled with dangers they had barely begun to understand. The hunters were coming, and this time there would be no easy escape. "They'll never stop," he whispered, voice low but steady. The cub tilted its head, tiny paws digging into his boots. He looked down at it and forced a faint smile. "Then we won't either." He tightened his grip around the cub, feeling its warmth and fragile strength. They were bound together now, two small beings facing a world that had no mercy. From the shadows above, the massive predator appeared, muscles coiled and eyes glowing yellow. Its presence was reassuring yet terrifying. The human felt a surge of hope. This creature had chosen them as allies, and now it would fight alongside them. The hunters' shouts echoed from below, precise, relentless. They were closing in, weapons raised, moving like shadows that refused to be shaken. The first hunter leaped onto a fallen tree, using it as a bridge to descend toward the cliff. Its weapon glowed a deadly blue, energy humming in the air. The human's pulse surged. "Not today," he muttered, grabbing a jagged rock and hurling it toward the hunter. The rock hit its shoulder, making it stumble. The cub let out a sharp squeal and darted forward, swiping at the hunter's ankle with claws that sparked faintly. The hunter yelped and regained balance, eyes narrowing in fury. From behind, another hunter fired, but the massive predator intervened. It lunged forward, smashing the attacker into a tree with such force that the trunk cracked, splinters flying. The human stumbled back but kept his eyes on the cub, shielding it with his body. Adrenaline surged through him, sharpening every sense. The cliff's edge was close, and a single misstep could send them tumbling into the abyss. "You can't hold us forever," a hunter shouted, voice metallic, filtered. Its companion advanced with twin weapons, energy arcing between them like deadly lightning. The human knew they had no chance in a head-on fight. They had to outsmart the hunters, using the terrain, their bond, and the predator's strength. He scanned the cliff. The jagged rocks below jutted outward, forming a narrow path along the cliffside. It was dangerous, almost suicidal, but it was their only chance. "Follow me," he whispered to the cub, voice tight with urgency. The cub pressed closer, tail flicking nervously but trusting him. The predator growled softly, circling around them protectively, muscles coiled for action. The human took the first step, careful to maintain balance. The hunters fired again, energy pulses sizzling past him, tearing chunks of rock from the cliff. He felt heat against his arm but pressed forward, heart hammering, mind focused entirely on survival. The cub scampered beside him, claws digging into the stone, tiny body trembling but determined. The hunters surged, one leaping to intercept. The predator reacted instantly, swiping and knocking it away with precise, crushing force. Another hunter aimed directly at the human. He rolled, barely avoiding the pulse that struck the cliffside, sending shards of stone flying. "We have to make it," he shouted, pulling the cub along. Halfway across the jagged path, a hunter lunged, grabbing the cub. The human scream tore through the air. "No!" He swung wildly, fists connecting with the hunter's torso, but it barely slowed him. The cub struggled, growling and scratching, small but fierce. Then the massive predator leapt, claws extended, slamming the hunter into the cliff face. Rocks tumbled, and the hunter slid down, disappearing into the jungle below with a muffled scream. The remaining hunters hesitated, eyes wide. The human and the cub reached a narrow ledge, panting, hearts racing. The predator landed beside them, still growling, muscles taut, eyes scanning the shadows. They were battered, exhausted but alive. For a moment, silence fell, broken only by the wind whistling past the cliff edge. The human knelt, brushing the cub's fur. "We did it," he said, voice trembling, chest heaving. The cub pressed against him, small body shaking but alive. "We survived, together." Behind them, the predator let out a low rumble, almost a purr, and stepped back, giving them space. It had done its part. Above, the sky darkened, clouds swirling as if reflecting the battle that had just passed. The hunters were retreating, regrouping, but the human knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The jungle was far from tamed, full of threats yet unseen, but they had faced the deadliest challenge so far, and survived. He looked at the cub, eyes shining. "You're stronger than I thought," he whispered. The cub nuzzled his hand, tiny claws brushing his skin, a bond forged in fire and fear. "We'll keep going," he promised. "No matter what comes next." The predator shifted beside them, massive and imposing, but it did not leave. Its eyes held a faint, intelligent glow, as if recognizing their courage, their determination. The human realized then that survival was not just about strength, speed, or weapons. It was about trust, loyalty, and the bonds formed in the face of overwhelming odds. As the wind swept through the cliffside, carrying distant echoes of the hunters, the human straightened, holding the cub close. "We face it all," he said quietly, "together." And somewhere in the dark jungle, eyes watched, waiting for the next move, but for now the human, the cub, and their unexpected ally had triumphed. They had survived the stand, and that was enough. The cliff seemed to stretch endlessly, the jungle below dark and mysterious, full of possibilities and threats. But for the first time the human felt a glimmer of hope. He looked at the cub, its small, brave face, and knew that no matter what the universe threw at them, they would face it head-on together.